Places and experiences are very closely tied together in our minds. That's something I recalled a few weeks ago. I went on a trip with my dad and my brothers, a motorcycle trip out to the East Coast, and we took the ferry in Manitowoc that goes to Ludington. You ever done that? And we had some time to kill in Manitowoc, so we kind of drove around the city, and that was where my dad vicared. So it's kind of like his intern year before I become a pastor. It's also where I went to kindergarten. And he took me right to the place where our apartment was, showed us a window that was ours, a parking lot I learned to ride my bike in. I didn't remember any of it, but he sure did. He took me on the road that went to the church he served at and the school I went to. Said he used to ride my bike on that when I was in kindergarten. It seemed like a long way for a kindergartner, but I had to take his word for it. I couldn't remember any of it. He took us to the place where the ice cream shop was and just drove around the city. And it's funny, we both lived there. But to me, it was just a place. But to him, the sights, the sounds, the smells, they brought back all those experiences. And you ever done that? Maybe you grew up somewhere and you left for a long time, and then you come back. Maybe you used to, something formational happened to you someplace, and then you leave it for a long time, and then you return for the first time in decades. And it's amazing how the sights, the sounds, the smells, it's almost like a time warp back in time. And to the person next to you who didn't experience it, it's just a place. But to you, it's a link to your past and to the lessons you learned there. You see, to a lot of the people in Jacob's time, that place at the end of that red arrow was just a town called Luz, little north of Jerusalem, little west of Jericho, in the land of the Canaanites. But to Jacob, that place was called Bethel, which means house of God, because there God showed him something that changed his life. And we read about that in Genesis chapter 28. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord. In Genesis 28, we find Jacob without a dime in his pocket and not a person by his side. He was alone. And sometimes that happens in life. Sometimes the people you depend upon, they're just not there anymore because life changes, because they have to move away. Other times God calls them home to heaven. That's how it works. But that was not the case here. You see, Jacob was alone because of Jacob. And that was the worst part. You heard about that last week, about how God's promise wasn't good enough for him, how he had to find a way to make the blessing his, how he manipulated his father, how he enraged his brother. And he must have played that over and over again in his mind that night as he went to sleep. Oh, I bet as he went to sleep that night, he could still feel the goat's hair that he put on his arms. I bet as he went to sleep that night, he could still smell Esau's clothes he put on, so he smelled like Esau. I bet as he went to sleep that night, he could still feel the pit in his stomach he felt when his mom gave him that food and he was to carry it in to meet his father. And when his father thought something was up and asked if it was really Esau, I bet every bit of him wanted to run out the room, and I bet as he went to sleep that night, he wished he had. But you know how that goes. You can regret what you've done all you want. You can replay those events over and over again in your mind, but you cannot change a thing. No matter how much you wished you would have ran out of the room, he didn't. He stayed. He lied. He got what he wanted, and he ruined his life. He had gained so little, and it cost him so much. And it was all to get something God had already promised him. Back before he was born, his mother sensed something going on between the twins that were in her womb. And this is what God said to her. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. God had already promised a blessing was his. But it wasn't good enough for Jacob. So he lied, and he deceived, and he manipulated. And he blew up the family of the promise. He had to run. Because his twin brother Esau was so mad that the only way he could comfort himself was to fantasize about the day he killed Jacob and got his revenge. He had dishonored his father. He would never see his mother again. He inherited that fortune, and yet he didn't have a dime in his pocket. The land would be his, but he had to leave it behind. Jacob lost everything. As he sat there going to sleep that night, I can't imagine what went through his mind. Or maybe I can. Because God deals with us the same way. He deals with us in terms of promises. And he's given us some good ones. Promised to bless us in all our ways. He's promised to bless us with what is best for us and promised to use all things, everything that happens, for the good of his people. And yet oftentimes those promises, they're just not good enough, are they? Because we get so engrossed in what we want. And it's not bad to want things. For there to be things that you aspire to, for there to be things that you'd like to have off in your future that hopefully one day you can attain or do or experience, that can be fine. But when we confuse the difference between what we want and what is best, we start to look at those gifts a little differently, don't we? And we can focus so much on those things we want, and we can forget all about the God who gives those gifts and who promises that what we have is what's best, urges us to be satisfied and content. But it's so easy we get lost in that, don't we? And like Jacob, we find ourselves acting in a way that shows that God's promise isn't good enough for us. And we make a mess out of it. And you get what you want. And you betray your spouse's trust. And you get the money you're after. And you lose everyone's respect. You have the fun you wanted to have, and you hurt all the people you want to share your life with. You get exactly what you want, and it turns out to be the worst. You see, so often God's promises are just not good enough for us. And like Jacob, we gain so little, and it costs us so much. Now Jacob finds himself alone. And the worst part was he knew it was all his fault. And yet he also learned something else. That God is not so easy to shake. Here's what God says to him in that dream in Genesis 28. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. And the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is a gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. When God comes to him that night, he doesn't come to him with I told you so's. He doesn't bring up how he dishonored his father. Doesn't mention how he so enraged his brother that his brother wanted to kill him. He doesn't mention that he'd never see his mother again. See, Jacob, these are the things he couldn't forget about if he tried. The things he was killing himself for every moment of the day. What does God do? He just gives him promise after promise after promise. He says, I'll give you and your descendants the land in which you're lying. The land he was about to leave behind. The land he was about to put in his rearview mirror and he would long to return to, God promises, would be his. He says, your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you'll spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. I mean, Jacob didn't have a girlfriend, didn't have a fiance. He had no wife, no prospects, and no way to provide for a family. And yet God says his descendants would be like the dust. Impossible to count. He says, all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Through Jacob, who had been a curse to his family, who had hurt everybody he cared about. He'd be a blessing to everyone, even you, because the Savior would come through his line. And in the meantime, God says, I am with you. I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. You see, there Jacob sat alone, and nobody wanted anything to do with him. But God, the God who knew everything he had done, he was right there by his side. See, right in front of his mind, he places that stairway to heaven. Because that is who our God is, a God who longs to be connected to us. And he sent his son Jesus to be that connection. To be the one who forgives us when no one else will forgive us. Who takes away the offenses that hurt the people in our lives. Who wipes the record clean. He won it at the price of his life because that's who God is. I mean, our God is so big. He created the universe. He fills the whole thing. Every single characteristic he has is infinite, and yet he is so closely involved with you. I mean, he wants to know everything about you. He urges you to come to him in prayer with things that are so small you wouldn't even mention them to your neighbor. And yet the God of the universe cares so much. Our God is a God who is near. Even if there was no one in the world who wanted to be by Jacob's side, Jacob learned that God is not so easy to shake. And so he got up the next morning, and he took that stone, he had put it at his head, and he builds it into a pillar, and he pours oil on top of it, and he calls the place Bethel, which means house of God. And he left that place knowing that even though he didn't have a dime in his pocket or a person by his side, he had God's promises. And maybe for the first time in his life, he realized that was enough. Now, 4,000 years have passed since then. And so many things in our world have changed. But what he saw remains the same. I mean, there for a moment, God peeled back the curtain to show him a reality that is always there. Jesus is that connection between us and God. And even if we drive everyone in our life away from us, even if we do things that means no one can look us in the eye, our God, he wipes a record clean. He makes a way between us and him, and he binds himself to us in promise after promise after promise. Even if you lose everything else, that's enough. You ever done that? Went back to where you grew up? Went back to a place you haven't been for decades where something formational happened to you? It's eerie, isn't it? The sights, the sounds, the smells, they just bring everything back. And I think almost everybody has a place like that. But I don't know what it is. But I know what Jacob's place was. It was Bethel. And he went back. Years and years later, after he had met his uncle Laban, after he had married his wives, after he had had his kids, after he had come back to the land of the promise, after he had wrestled with God, been reconciled with Esau, met his father again, after this crazy story where his kids put to death a whole city, Jacob had the same fear. I'm a stranger in a strange land. I'm alone. And guess where God sent him? Back to Bethel. And this time he didn't show him the stairway in a dream. He didn't have to, because the sights, the sounds, the smells, they brought it all back. And God bound himself to Jacob in those same promises. And that was enough. Amen.